On a cold March morning in 1933, a shopkeeper in Ohio turned up the radio and heard words that didn't sound like America. Banks closed, payments delayed. And then a new order from Washington. Bring your gold to the bank, coins, bullion, even the gold certificates tucked in envelopes, and exchange it for paper money. Keep a small amount if you must, but the rest had to go. Overnight, the safest thing ordinary people thought they owned became a problem to be solved. To understand why the United States made owning most gold illegal that year, you have to feel the pressure of the moment. The country was in the fourth year of the Great Depression, prices were falling, not rising. That sounds nice until you try to run a business when your customers lose jobs, your inventory sells for less each month, and your debts don't shrink with prices. Deflation punishes borrowers and rewards anyone holding cash, or gold, so people hoarded both. They yanked deposits from banks and stuffed coins under mattresses. Those bank runs weren't irrational panic. They were a rational response to a system that kept breaking. Franklin Roosevelt took office on March 4, 1933, and declared a national bank holiday 2 days later to stop the bleeding. The diagnosis from his team was blunt. The gold standard's rules were starving the economy of money. Under the classical promise, every dollar was tied to a fixed amount of gold. When people hoarded gold, they were also hoarding the ability of banks to expand credit. As gold drained out of the system, the money supply shrank, prices fell further, and more banks failed. The feedback loop was vicious, so the administration reached for a tool that would have sounded unthinkable a decade earlier. On April 5, 1933, Executive Order 6102 required most private holders to deliver gold coins, bullion, and gold certificates to the Federal Reserve via their banks in exchange for paper dollars at the official rate, $20.67 per ounce. There were narrow exceptions, small amounts for personal use, certain industrial and professional needs, and collectible or rare coins. But the big idea was simple: stop hoarding, pull gold back into the banking system, and free the government to expand the money supply without watching reserves vanish through a hole in the floor. The order carried teeth. Violations could mean fines or even prison. Banks were told to cooperate, and access to safe deposit boxes in some cases required proof that their contents weren't gold being squirreled away. In practice, there wasn't a wave of door-to-door seizures. The leverage point was the banks. If you needed your bank, and almost everyone did, you met the new rules where you kept your money. Then came the move that still stings in memory. After collecting gold at $20.67, the government revalued gold to $35 per ounce under the Gold Reserve Act of 1934. Put differently, the dollar was devalued. If you had surrendered 10 ounces a few months earlier, you received about $206.70. After revaluation, that same gold on the government's books was worth $350. Critics called it a swindle. Supporters called it oxygen. By marking the currency down relative to gold, the administration raised domestic prices, made U.S. exports more competitive, and expanded the room for new credit. Debtors, farmers, homeowners, businesses could breathe again. There was more legal machinery behind the scenes. Many bonds and contracts of that era included gold clauses, promising repayment in gold or in dollars equivalent to gold. In 1935, the Supreme Court heard the gold clause cases and by narrow margins upheld the government's power to void those clauses for public and private debts. The message was unmistakable. Stabilizing the economy took precedence over defending a pre-crash promise that had become impossible to honor without deepening the crisis. Stripped to its essentials, 1933 was a choice between two kinds of faith. One faith said, keep the old convertibility rule at all costs, even if it means deflation, bankruptcies, and breadlines, because rules are what make money trustworthy. The other faith said, change the rule to keep people working and banks open, because money exists to serve the economy, not the other way around. Roosevelt chose the second. You don't have to cheer the method to understand the logic. What did this mean for ordinary people? For savers who held paper dollars, the immediate effect was relief. Banks reopened, deposits returned, and prices stopped falling. For those who kept wealth in gold coins, the story was more complicated. Some complied and swapped for paper. Some quietly kept small stashes. Some had rare coins that fit exemptions. But the big pools of gold, inside banks, corporations, and institutions, were now under federal control. The point wasn't to punish citizens, it was to pull gold back into a central reserve that could anchor the banking system while policy loosened. And what did it mean for gold itself? It didn't disappear. The U.S. government held it. Foreign central banks could still settle with the U.S. in gold under the later Bretton Woods rules. Industries and jewelers kept using it under license. But for U.S. households, the legal status changed. Private ownership of most gold was effectively banned until the 1970s, when Congress reversed course and President Ford signed the law re-legalizing it in 1974. The ban was a crisis tool, not a permanent philosophy. There are persistent myths around 1933 that are worth clearing up. First, that the government raided every home. It didn't. Compliance happened mostly through banks, because that's where the leverage and the records were. Second, that everyone who turned in gold was cheated. If you focus only on the later $35 price, it feels that way. But the policy's goal was macroeconomic: halt deflation, recapitalize banks, and break the hoarding loop. The revaluation raised farm prices and wages in dollar terms. In a collapsing economy, those changes mattered as much as the book profit on metal. Third, that it could never happen again. The specifics of 1933 were unique to a gold standard world. Today's fiat system can expand or contract without confiscating metal. That doesn't mean governments lack intrusive tools during crises. It means the tools look different. The broader lesson is more durable than the details. Monetary systems are political systems in disguise. They encode priorities and trade-offs, and when stress rises, we learn which priorities win. Under a strict gold regime, defending convertibility can mean accepting deep domestic pain. Under a fiat regime, preserving jobs and credit can mean accepting inflation risk and currency volatility. There is no system that removes those choices. There are only rules that change who pays and when. If you zoom out, 1933 sits on a timeline with 3 turning points. The classical gold standard broke under World War I because war demanded money faster than gold could supply it. The interwar gold standard collapsed because trying to return at old parities imposed deflation on democracies that wouldn't tolerate it. Bretton Woods, gold for the dollar, dollars for everyone else, worked until the world needed more dollars than America could credibly back with metal. In each case, convertibility yielded to stability, and rules yielded to voters. So what should you take from a year when America made owning most gold illegal? Not a morality play, but a map. When trust reigns, people hoard whatever the system says is safest. If that safest asset is also the oxygen the system needs to breathe, the government will reach for it. In 1933, that asset was gold. The tool was Executive Order 6102. The aim was to stop a deflationary spiral that was tearing the country apart. You can disagree with the method and still see the intention. Imagine the shopkeeper again, months later. The radio now carries fewer bank failures and more job postings. Prices have stopped falling. He still keeps a few old coins. Legal collectibles now, a link to an anxious spring when money changed shape. He learned something that year that's easy to forget in calmer times. Money isn't a monument. It's a decision we make together about how to trade, save, and survive. In 1933, America rewrote that decision in the middle of a storm. And whether you keep your savings in paper, digits, or a small golden keepsake, the question that echoes from that moment is the same. When the rules and the people come into conflict, which one do you expect your leaders to protect?